Ukraine to receive substantial new aid package, US official says at NATO Summit. U.S. President Joe Biden and NATO leaders have unanimously agreed to send a substantial new aid package to Ukraine. National Security Council Senior Director for Europe Amanda Sloat told reporters Wednesday, but she declined to provide additional details. The alliance will also hold the inaugural meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council before Biden meets with Zelensky, with near and long-term support for Ukraine on the agenda. Sloat said, later Wednesday, Biden will give a major address on foreign policy, reflecting on the strength and power of the NATO alliance. Sloat added. U.S. official gives few details on reforms needed for Ukraine to join NATO. US official on Wednesday offered vague details about the reforms the United States says are necessary for Ukraine to join NATO a day, after the alliance issued a joint communique lacking a specific pathway or timeline for the war-torn country's eventual membership. Ukraine still needs to make a number of reforms in order to join. National Security Council Senior Director for Europe Amanda Sloat told reporters that we recognize that Ukraine has already made significant progress in terms of reforms, but as both the President Joe Biden has said and as the communique made clear, there is still the need for Ukraine to take further democratic and security sector reforms. The President has been clear that we think Ukraine can get there, but that is still going to be a requirement for Ukraine to join. Sloat described the communique as a strong, positive message reaffirming that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance, noting that the membership action plan was no longer required for Ukraine to join. But she said there are a series of governance and security sector reforms that Washington is working on with Kiev and with NATO more broadly, pointing to the annual national program document drafted by Ukraine and reviewed by allies' foreign ministers each year. Pressed again for any specific example of the reforms the alliance is looking for, she said the U.S. is taking its lead from Ukraine. As we saw with the discussions on the communique, everything coming out of the alliance remains a consensus decision, as I've said on the annual national program. Part of this is for Ukraine to identify the reforms and the progress that it plans to make and things that it plans to address, she said. Zelensky arrives for second day of NATO Summit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived for the second day of the NATO Summit in Vilnius, Lithuania. Speaking to reporters, Zelensky said he has 3 priority questions on the agenda Wednesday. He outlined those as a new weapons packages, an invitation for NATO membership, and security guarantees for Ukraine on the way to NATO. We want to be on the same page with everybody with all the understanding. And I understand that we will have this invitation when security measures will allow, Zelensky said, referring to Ukraine's NATO membership bid. Andriy Yermak, head of the Ukrainian president's office, said on Telegram that Kyiv will talk about defense, security, weapons, and President Zelensky's peace formula during day 2 of the summit. On Wednesday, Ukraine will take part in the first inaugural meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council and hold bilateral meetings, Yermak said. Zelensky expects good news from meeting with German Chancellor Scholz. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he expects good news from his meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz at the NATO Summit in Vilnius Wednesday. In a tweet, Zelensky said the meeting between the pair had started. Dialogue with Olaf Scholz will be meaningful as always. We expect good news regarding the protection of the lives of Ukrainians and our defense, Zelensky said. Biden and G7 leaders set to announce new boost for Ukraine's military capabilities. As President Joe Biden and G7 leaders are set to make a major announcement, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky Wednesday in Vilnius, Lithuania, about boosting Ukraine's military capabilities, offering additional assistance to the war-torn country as its leader expresses frustration with path to NATO membership. The United States, along with G7 leaders, will announce our intent to help Ukraine build a military that can defend itself and deter a future attack. National Security Council Senior Director for Europe Amanda Sloat told reporters during a briefing Wednesday. The announcement will start a process of bilateral negotiations with Ukraine. Sloat said there will be a long-term investment in Ukraine's future force, aimed at ensuring Ukraine has a sustainable fighting force capable of defending Ukraine now and deterring Russian aggression in the future, a strong and stable economy, and the help Ukraine needs to advance the reform agenda to support the good governance necessary to advance Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations. She said. Sloat added the purpose of the declaration would be twofold: bolstering Ukraine's deterrence and sending a message to Russia. She said the announcement will be made at an event with the G7 leaders and President Zelensky following the end of the NATO Summit, with more information to come. Russian drones target Ukrainian Air Force says. Ukrainian air defenses shot down 11 of 15 Iran-made Shade attack drones launched by Russia early Wednesday. Ukraine's Air Force said on Telegram it's unclear whether the reports are related. Zelensky's frustration over lack of NATO timeline looms over final day of summit. President Joe Biden enters day 2 of the NATO Summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, facing questions about Ukraine's path to becoming a member of the alliance, with concerns from his Ukrainian counterpart on full display and fissures among NATO leaders on the thorny issue. Ukraine has been a dominant item on the summit's agenda as the U.S. president looks to keep the group united behind President Volodymyr Zelensky in the face of Russia's invasion. While the final communique from the summit does remove one barrier to entry, the Ukrainian president will likely be left looking for more signs of assurances from the allied nations. While US officials have emphatically said Ukraine will not be joining NATO as a member coming out of this meeting, there are a few concrete steps or timelines the group has offered as a significant show of support for the war-torn nation. Zelensky arrived in Lithuania on Tuesday and will participate in the summit and meet one-on-one with Biden. His attendance a sign of unity that threatens to be overshadowed by a blistering statement he issued while he was on his way to the gathering. The Ukrainian president said he has received signals that certain wording is being discussed, without Ukraine emphasizing that the wording is about the invitation to become NATO member, not about Ukraine's membership. It's unprecedented and absurd when time frame is not set, neither for the invitation nor for Ukraine's membership, while at the same time vague wording about its conditions is added even for inviting Ukraine. It seems there is no readiness neither to invite Ukraine to NATO nor to make it a member of the alliance. Zelensky said in the statement issued via tweet, adding uncertainty is weakness. And I will openly discuss this at the summit. The final communique released Tuesday is unlikely to provide Zelensky the answers he demands. While the allies did agree to remove one requirement for Ukrainian entrance to the group, a membership action plan, given Kyiv's close relationship with NATO nations, it did not provide a firm timeline for when the Ukrainians will become official members. NATO reaffirms support for Ukraine's push for membership. Here's what's to know from the summit in Lithuania. NATO allies on Tuesday reaffirmed their support for Ukraine's push for membership of the alliance. According to a final declaration issued by the 31-member group at a summit in Lithuania, Ukraine's future is in NATO, it said. We will be in a position to extend an invitation to Ukraine to join the alliance when allies agree and conditions are met. NATO allies also reiterated their condemnation of Russia's war and its blatant violations of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and OSCE commitments and principles.